What's up everybody, Jeff here, and we're back for some more Rule of Cool. In this series, I'm taking you through all the masters from a particular faction, giving you a little bit of info about their background, as well as showing off some art and pictures of painted models, so you can get a better idea of the look and feel of the crews. So if you're looking to get into a new faction, hopefully this will help you pick out which master and crew you like the best. This time around, we're looking at the 10 Thunders, but just in case you missed it, we've already covered the Arcanists, so you can check out that video linked up in the cards. If you're not sure what faction you want to play, then check out the faction breakdown that I did, going over each faction at a higher level, and giving you a little bit of their background so you can pick out which one is your favorite. Now, just like last time, I'm going to have Doug over at the Danger Planet, who's going to add in a little bit of information about how each master plays. So huge thanks to Doug and everybody at the Danger Planet for the support. Make sure you go over and check out their channel, because they do a lot of really good stuff about the gameplay. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, then check out the Discord link in the description. You can support us over on Patreon, use the weird affiliate link, or check out the merch store. All the links down below. And with that, let's get into the 10 Thunders. Luck can be a fickle thing. When Jacob Lynch won the Honeypot Casino in a game of poker, he thought his luck was on the rise. But he soon found that he didn't make a great manager, and he was forced to take out a loan from the 10 Thunders crime syndicate. Business started turning around, but not fast enough for him to pay back the loan, and everything looked like it was falling apart until he was approached by two strange men. Mr. Graves and Mr. Tannen offered to bail him out of his situation if he would only allow them exclusive use of the casino's basement. Having no other choice, Jacob agreed, and soon the casino was doing better than it ever had. Until Jacob found the reason. It turned out that Graves and Tannen were actually never born, and in the casino's basement, a creature known as the Hungering Darkness was lurking. It was spreading its insidious influence called brilliance, causing the patrons of the casino to get addicted like a drug. Their bodies would slowly start to mutate, and eventually they would be brought before the Hungering Darkness to be consumed. When Jacob found out the truth, he was brought before the monster, who was surprised to find that the man was resistant to its influence. They struck a bargain. Jacob would become his host, and in exchange, the Hungering Darkness would let him live. This relationship was uncomfortable, but proved lucrative, and Lynch was able to maintain peaceful relations with both the 10 Thunders and the Neverborn. That was until Nekima rose to power and received a prophecy that the Hungering Darkness would be her downfall. She sent her minions to kill Jacob, but he successfully fought them off, though he's now ostracized from the rest of the Neverborn. As time has gone on, Jacob has found that his resistance to the brilliance has been waning, and it seems that it's only a matter of time before the Hungering Darkness consumes him too. So what's cool about Jacob Lynch and the Honeypot crew? Well, first of all, most of the humans in the crew are themed around what you might expect to see in a casino. You've got the bouncers, the card sharks, and some ladies of the night. But in addition to all those, you also have all the people who are affected by brilliance, and it causes their bodies to get misshapen, and they develop these growths that they can use as weapons. And as it gets worse, eventually they turn into the depleted, where they're barely able to function before they get absorbed by the Hungering Darkness. Oh, and the Hungering Darkness himself. He's had several different iterations, but they're all some really cool models, and they can be a ton of fun to paint. But with that, we're going to go over to Doug from the Danger Planet to talk a little bit about how Jacob Lynch plays on the table.
Jacob Lynch 1 is a bubble-based support master. He functions very heavily off of a mechanic called brilliance, and a lot of models in his crew have very strong 4 to 6 inch auras that often you're looking to overlap and take advantage of, and then you can generate brilliance onto things and then shed that brilliance for extra effects. You also see in Jacob Lynch's keyword, which is Honeypot, rig the deck, which is a top of deck manipulation type of passive ability that triggers when a model activates. You see that on Jacob, but you'll also see it on a lot of models in his crew. If you look at some of the stuff that he's doing, his gun, the Derringer, can hand out brilliance, which is really nice. And then he's got a friendly handshake, again, gives out brilliance and can do a couple of other things that are interesting, like pushing this model or the target small amounts. Well, 3 inches, it's not necessarily a small amount. Could be the difference between scoring a secondary or primary or not. So again, this is really more of a bubble crew that's trying to proc brilliance onto your enemies and also your friendlies for different added effects. Now, when we look at Jacob Lynch 2, Jacob Lynch Dark Bet, this is one of the most interesting masters in the game, in my opinion, because when you hire Jacob Lynch 2, his totem becomes the master, and you effectively get 2 AP3 master models at this point. Jacob, in his secondary form, isn't as much of an engine for the crew as he is a life battery for Hungering Darkness. You can do a lot of things with this because Hungering Darkness himself can do a lot of interesting things. And Hungering Darkness has an obey and has a very strong attack and is incorporeal. So You can either choose to dive specific models with Hungering Darkness, do a bunch of damage, and then have him die and then pull back, and Jacob Lynch heals him right back up, and then he goes back out and does it again. Or you can leverage Hungering Darkness as more of a board state control piece that even if they invest resources into to kill, it's just going to come back and walk right back to the same part of the board. And those are generally the two ways that folks will end up playing Jacob Lynch Dark Bet. But he does have a lot of other interesting play to him, including a lot of the abilities on the back of his card. And so that's probably the TLDR that makes the most sense on Jacob Lynch Dark Bet.
Lucas McCabe came from a wealthy and respected family in England. However, he was not comfortable living under the thumb of the guild, and he soon left behind his life of luxury and struck out to find adventure. He started searching for treasure and found himself on the wrong side of the law, and also on the wrong side of some bad people. This led to an incident where his wife was killed, and he was forced to flee to Malifaux before his past finally caught up with him. He made enemies of the Katanakas, the family that led the Ten Thunders crime syndicate, but they decided to spare him because he could be a useful asset. They sent him to infiltrate the guild, and he got a job traveling around Malifaux searching for treasures for the Governor General himself. For years he worked for the guild, but he was truly serving the Ten Thunders, often replacing the treasures that he found with fakes and forgeries, and sending the real treasures to the Thunders. One of these forgeries was used by the Governor General when he tried to ascend to tyranthood, and it caused the ritual to spectacularly fail, resulting in the creation of the Burning Man. Eventually the guild found out about his treachery, and when they kicked him out, he realized that he would no longer be useful to the Thunders, and that would be the end of him. But not long after being fired, McCabe was contacted by the Malifaux Explorers Society, who asked him to help them track down some ancient Neverborn artifacts. McCabe accepted this offer. Now he could continue doing what he loved, and also be useful to the Thunders. McCabe and the Wastrel crew are really interesting. He's got kind of an Indiana Jones thing going on, and most of the people in his crew are some sort of criminal. They all kind of have this theme of rich people who decided to go out and do crime because it seemed like more fun. He kind of fits in perfectly with the Explorer Society because of that. Oh, and then there's Luna, McCabe's totem, who is a very good girl. So if you needed a reason to play this crew, I think that's probably good enough. So with that, let's go back over to Doug to talk a little bit about how McCabe plays in the game.
So we're going to look at Lucas McCabe, who is another dual faction master. McCabe is generally characterized as highly mobile, very schemy, very non-combat oriented necessarily. He likes to run around the board, put scheme markers in places that are very frustrating for your opponent, and he likes scoring secondary points and being very quick and mobile. Now, one of the premier things he does do from an attack action standpoint is use the net gun, which can both slow and stagger big groups of models. So while he's running around the board, or while his crew is running around the board scoring points, he's trying to control the movement of his opponents by shooting them with his net gun effectively. He does have a bullwhip, which can be okay, but it's probably not the primary thing you want to be doing with this Napster. He also has trample, which means that he can move through severe terrain or other models very easily. And he also has the ability to give out different types of upgrades. Nowhere near as much as Yalo is doing, but it is still something that he does, and he gives them out, and they're different buffs. And it's going to be even more important when we go to talk to his second version. Yeah, we'll put a quick cork in that and just finish off. Another thing to mention about Relic Hunter McCabe is that he has the dismount demise ability. So when you kill him, you just killed his horse. He actually gets off and fights on foot. At that point, he's probably a bit less effective. He's more kind of like a shadow of his former horse riding self, I would say. But now we can go and talk to McCabe 2. So McCabe 2, Tomb Delver, is a lot more of a super solo, is what I've heard people refer to him as. He also has Depths of Malifaux, so he's unaffected by both severe and hazardous terrain. He has extended reach, which means that attack actions generated by the charge action cannot hurt him. And he has a Bleeder Lash, which is a very good attack that he can stack with his reliquary upgrades to make him even scarier. So oftentimes you will see McCabe Tomb Delver gearing up with all these different upgrades and then throwing himself in the middle of some really hard to kill opponents and tearing them apart. Very different than how McCabe 1 plays, whereas McCabe 1, along with the rest of his crew, is very schemy, and mobility oriented. He's going to be a lot more of just a straightforward push him up the map, throw a lightsaber on him, which is this blade upgrade that he can put on, and put on a bunch of other different upgrades and kill what you feel like killing. And so it gives you the dichotomy of whether or not you want to use the mounted version of McCabe to control your opponent's movement, or just try to go after isolating and killing models at a time with Tomb Delver.
Centuries ago, Yalo stood against an invasion from another realm. In the process of doing so, he was cursed to walk the spirit realm, unable to make his way back to the physical world. He wandered the different paths of the spirit world, until eventually he was able to make contact with the real world through the devotion and focus of his ancestors. He finally found himself able to remember who he was, but was unable to manifest a physical form for very long, until his niece Chiaki came to Malifaux. During his time in the spirit world, he made contact with several of his ancestors and helped to bring them back to Malifaux. He served the Ten Thunders in exchange for information about his past, and he's recently learned about a coming incursion from the Oni from the beyond. These creatures are the same ones who tried to invade centuries ago, and now he's focusing his attention on resisting their newest incursion into Earth. Yalo is a master who actually has two keywords, Ancestor and Retainer. And it's pretty cool because his whole crew is themed around his ancestors, these different powerful models who, when they die, their spirit sticks around and buffs the other models on the table. There's a bunch of them and they're all pretty strange, but then on the other side you have a bunch of minions who work with those buffs and can actually bring back some of the ancestors. So there's a lot of good variety there, and it's a really cool looking crew. Asami in particular is one of my favorites. It's a big suit of samurai armor that's just inhabited by a spirit. There's no body inside. But now let's go to Doug, who's going to tell us a little bit more about how Yalo plays.
Yalo is a really interesting master. He builds slowly over the course of the game and stacks reliquary upgrades on himself, and also redistributes them around to different models in his crew. Each turn, he is getting an additional upgrade onto himself, and also the models that he hires have these reliquary upgrades that they hand out when they die, or sometimes when they do other things. So Yalo is kind of like a slow build master, where his abilities are going to be stronger on turns 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the game than they are initially when you start out with him, which is a really interesting concept. He's one of the few what I call slow build masters in the game. And then if we look at Yalo 2's card, he is about the angriest air balloon that you'll ever see. He gives out an upgrade that allows him to tether his movement to a minion, because he himself is only movement 2. But he has a really strong friendly obey action that gives out focused to whatever he's targeting. And he also has a really strong attack action in Twist Reality with a stonable stunning strike trigger that can stun the target really, really easily. And Twist Reality is usually an attack action that you only see out of the Neverborn, and it's one of the choice things that they do. Really strong ability. And then you can see Choose a Path can either be used to score schemes using friendly scheme markers, or you can use it to remove enemy scheme markers. So Angry Air Balloon floats around the board, obeys stuff, gives it focus, and then twists and shouts all day long with Twist Reality, effectively. That's what Yalo 2 is doing.
Asami Tanaka was a humble maiden who worked with her family to protect a shrine in Japan. That was until the day that the shrine was attacked, and a demonic Oni from the beyond offered her a trade. He would help her fight off the attackers and heal her body, and all she needed to do was let him in. She agreed, but soon found that her injuries made her unable to carry a child. The Oni inside her promised to give her a child, and use this as leverage to continue to expand his influence over her. She was soon recruited by the Ten Thunders, who thought they could use her abilities to their advantage, and Asami plays along because she wants their resources to try to figure out a way to rid herself of the Oni. After coming to Malifaux, she found out the Oni's true intention. He was trying to use her to bring his master through to Malifaux. Asami, with the help of Yalo, thwarted his plan, and in the process they found out that the Oni were coming. So Asami and the Oni crew are one of the most unique crews in the Ten Thunders. She's all about working with these Oni, which are creatures from Japanese mythology that she can summon from this other dimension. They come in a bunch of different types, and if you know anything about Japanese mythology, you might recognize some of them. Giant spider centaurs, anthropomorphized birds, angry blue monkeys, all kinds of really cool stuff. It's a really big keyword, so there's a lot of stuff to collect. But if you like painting and modeling, it's definitely a really fun project, and it's one of the coolest looking crews in the whole game, in my opinion. But with that, let's go back to Doug, who's going to tell us more about how Asami plays.
Asami is a quintessential summoner. Most of what she's doing is she's summoning in models from the maw they may come ability. It lets you bring in a bunch of different scary summonable monsters that can tear through your opponent's armies if they get enough of them, like the Joragumo are really scary. She also has Arcane Reservoir, so she's going to have an extra card all the time, so because her maximum hand size is increased. It's very good. And then on top of that, she's got a pretty decent shot and a pretty decent melee, but really kind of the star of the show here is summoning in models. She's the quintessential summoner of the 10 Thunders faction, effectively. Asami version 2 is a little bit different. She's working all off of Dimensional Rifts abilities. So she creates rift markers that she can blip models between on the board. She's no longer a summoner, but she does have some protection for her Oni, and she natively has a bunch of good defense in terms of Arcane Shielded too. Change to the Earth means that if she's in line of sight of any models and they try to spam actions, they get injured, which is generally a thing that people don't want on their models. So it's a very strong passive ability. And then she can create additional rift markers with Into the Beyond. And that's how you can create more rift markers to blip things around the board using the Dimensional Rifts ability on the front of her card. And that's effectively what she's doing.
Misaki Katanaka was the daughter of the leader of the 10 Thunders. She was sent to Earth ahead of the rest of the organization, and tasked with spying on all the other power players, sending her operatives among their ranks as infiltrators. After her people were in key positions among the Guild, Arcanus, and even the Neverborn, Misaki's father came to Malifaux to continue their infiltration. The crime syndicate specialized in smuggling as well as subterfuge, and they intended to bide their time before they made a play for real power. Misaki, who was originally reluctant to take on a role of leadership within the organization, soon saw that her father was on the wrong path. He abused his power and neglected his responsibilities as the leader, and eventually the two butted heads. Misaki challenged her father to a duel, which she easily won, striking her father down and taking on his role as the head of the Thunders. She immediately purged all the people loyal to him, and began promoting people loyal to her to positions of power. She put a stop to some of her father's more brutal practices, and was not above taking the advice of her advisors, some of whom were far wiser than she. But the Thunders are still a crime syndicate, and she was not above using violence to keep the people in line, and to stamp out any rival organizations. Things were going well, until the arrival of the Burning Man. When the mysterious entity came to Malifaux, Misaki started seeing visions of her father, and rumors started spreading that she was losing her mind and talking to herself. She used to be a very hands-on leader, but now she goes long stretches of time hiding alone in her quarters, doing who knows what. Misaki's another personal favorite of mine, and she's actually the reason that I picked up the game in the first place. But my buddy Jet over at the YouTube channel WarLore is another big fan of hers, so he's going to tell you a little bit about why she's so cool.
Hi, this is Jet from WarLore. Let's talk Tanaka. Misaki Katanaka, to be precise. I have no idea if Katanaka is a real Japanese name, but Misaki is often translated as Beautiful Blossom, which is very appropriate because Misaki in her last blossom keyword grows and spirals outward like a budding flower, and with each game I grew to appreciate her more and more. First of all, Misaki and her keyword look very cool. They are mostly ninja with masks and unusual weapons. The Katanaka sniper is neat, Minako Rei is fascinating, Ototo is just delightful. From the moment a friend gave me her box, I was intrigued by the rest of her faction and keyword. Different playstyles should feel different, and when you play with Misaki in Last Blossom, I really felt like I was doing ninja stuff. Misaki's main thing is that every round, you disappear and throw some smoke bombs. When you activate Misaki, you reappear on one of those smoke markers. She's always dealing out high damage because she uses her free action, Abandoned Honor, to shuffle your best cards back into your Fate deck. She can stun people with her trigger, You Are Already Dead. And when she uses her Big Bicento in melee, she can just carve guys up. So yeah, playing her means you get the fantasy of a pop culture ninja. You teleport around, do high damage, and escape trouble. I'm a smooth-brained fool who likes the hot evil lady that does big stab. She's very Malifaux. Misaki is also very Malifaux in the sense that, both versions of her miniatures are pretty fiddly to assemble, and both require a bunch of 30mm shadow markers, which don't come in the box, and you do need a lot of them. The old sculpts are kinda bonkers. Tiny contact points and strange choices of scale. Look at how big Shang is. I mounted his ass on a big rock so he'd fit on a 30mm base. But that's been rectified with the new box. Misaki is an older master, so she also has a huge number of models to choose from. They're all cool. With her Torakage, they just look so cool. So I always use them as scheme runners, but I also love Minako Rei because she unlocks an entire summoning mechanic within Misaki's crew. More than anything, Malifaux lets you play up the fantasy of being a ninja in a way that's hard to match. Throwing stars, stab, and now I'm done with my talk. Disappear into shadows!
Thanks a lot, Jet. Don't forget to check out WarLore. He does a lot of stuff about Infinity, but he covers Malifaux as well, so definitely go take a look. But with that, let's go back over to Doug to talk a little bit about how Misaki plays on the game.
Misaki Katanata is one of my favorite masters in Malifaux, and she's actually the first master I ever practiced competitive Malifaux with and took her to a tournament. She's all about burying and unburying using shadow markers. So she has the ability for isolated blip movement around the board, and then she can defend herself using extended reach to stop charge actions. And generally, she's kind of popping up, killing something, popping away, kind of like whack-a-mole. And she has a really strong stat 7 2-inch reach with a lot of good triggers on her attack. She can do a ton of damage with that. And she also has an equally strong, maybe not equally strong, but very strong shockwave that she can spam out if that becomes good. And then Obuyun's command allows her to support fellow high damage dealing models by allowing them to take charge actions, like some of the bigger hitters in 10 Thunders. And then Abandon Honor is her fast action, which allows her to have a bit of deck manipulation, although it's a little light. But the core thing you're doing here with Misaki Katanata is you're playing a very deadly game of whack-a-mole, constantly keeping your opponent off balance with an incredibly damaging master that's going to be operating through these shadow markers. Now, if we look at Misaki Katanata Fractured, this is a lot more of a control master. She's still generating and using shadow markers, but she's using these to control different types of placement on friendly and enemy. She also has obeys, so it's pretty easy to slot her into an obey master or an obey-based control master. And then she has a ranged weapon with ink tip darts. It's pretty good and can help generate more shadow markers for you. And then again, her fast action leans into dropping additional scheme markers and moving targets around. She's a bit slower. She focuses more on board control and obeying high value targets and either giving them injured if they're an opponent or focused if they're an ally.
Mei Fang came to Malifaux from China and was ordered by the 10 Thunders to infiltrate the Miners and Steamfitters Union. She quickly rose through their ranks, developing a good reputation among the workers, and eventually she became the leader of the Foundry, the group in charge of expanding the rail lines around Malifaux. She used this position to spy on the Union and the Arcanists, and manipulated the rail lines, slowing down or speeding up their construction as the 10 Thunders needed. While this was going on, she was also observing the way that the Chinese immigrants were being treated by the mostly Japanese 10 Thunders leadership. She found that her people were being exploited, just like back home, where they were struggling to throw off the occupation of the guild. Eventually, Misaki took over the 10 Thunders, but Mei Fang didn't see any improvement in the way her people were being treated. She decided to betray the 10 Thunders, preparing to take many of their resources and bring them back to Earth to help fight off the guild. But Misaki confronted her the day she was set to leave, and the two women fought. Misaki got the better of Mei Fang, who reluctantly conceded. She expected Misaki to kill her, but instead the Oyabun offered her a truce, claiming that she was unaware of the way the Chinese were being treated, and promising to offer some limited support if Mei Fang would pledge her loyalty. The woman reluctantly agreed, knowing that her true loyalty was to her people and her workers. Mei Fang's crew is really interesting. Her models actually span 3 different factions, the 10 Thunders, the Arcanists, and the Bayou. She's got the types of people you would expect in a railworking crew, like laborers and workers, but Mei Fang also has control over the Metal Gaiman and Metal Golem, these big constructs that can be used to build out the rail lines quickly, or, beat people up. But then on top of all that, she's actually got a couple of gremlins in her crew. These little creatures actually took some interest in what her and her workers were doing, and wandered over and decided to lend a hand. No one really knows why, but they found them helpful, so they let them stay. But now let's go hear from Doug again to find out a little bit more about how Mei Fang plays.
So we're going to look at Mei Fang. She's both part of the 10 Thunders as well as the Arcanists. A lot of what makes Mei Fang one unique is the fact that she can use what's called Ride the Rails. Ride the Rails is a ability that covers her and most of her crew. If a model is within one of a scrap marker when it takes the walk action, instead of moving normally, it can place itself in base contact with another scrap marker within 12 inches, even if the model is engaged. What this does is it allows her crew to have a huge degree of flexibility moving around the board, almost ice skating to wherever they want to be, and then using powerful attacks to attack their enemies. The other things that are notable is Deadly Claws is a pretty damaging melee attack that she has access to. Defensively, she also has Vent Steam, which is a really, really powerful ability. So that's what Mei Fang 1 is all about. Now, when we go to talk about Mei Fang 2, Mei Fang's foreman, it's a very different conversation. Mei Fang 2 is a lot more of a support and summoning master. She has a couple of things that are very powerful on the front of her card. Hazard Pay allows friendly Foundry models within 12, which is a huge range, to choose to be unaffected by hazardous terrain. Heated Iron is a once per activation passive ability that can just do ping damage when scrap markers are dropped in contact with enemies, which is really good. They also still have Ride the Rails, which is, one of the marquee abilities of Mei Fang, and it's here as well. And then you have Safety Inspection, which is during the start phase, everything within Aura 8 gets shielded 1, which is a huge range again. So some really strong support abilities baked into Mei Fang 2. If you look at the back of her card, she's got Steelcraft, which summons Metal Gammon. She's got Impromptu Invention, which is a very, very flexible ability, usually seen on support masters. And then Modified Welder, she can do either healing or some amount of damage with it. And then Lay the Track allows her to generate additional scrap markers as her fast action.
Yuko Hamasaki is the proprietor of the Key and Gong, a brothel and tea house in the Little Kingdom. She's always chosen not to take sides, preferring to keep herself in the middle because her real business was in information. The tea house offered her an excellent opportunity to collect intel, and buying and selling it could be quite lucrative. Yuko herself is very secretive, choosing to hide in plain sight and blending in among the other average workers in the tea house. She didn't want to work for the 10 Thunders, but when Misaki walked into her establishment, she knew it would be hard to refuse the woman's offer. The two women quickly took a liking to each other, Misaki admiring Yuko's cleverness and wisdom, but Yuko needed to test the Oyabun. She knew of Misaki's father's brutal ways, and so she gave the woman intel about Mei Fang's betrayal, curious to see how the woman would react. When she returned, having spared Mei Fang's life, and found a way for the women to continue cooperating with each other, Yuko was impressed, and she agreed to work for Misaki, but only as a mentor, not an enforcer. Yuko's crew's really cool. They're not the typical crew you'd find in a war game. She's got a bunch of girls that work for her dressed as geishas, and they were really unique and interesting looking on the tabletop. In addition to that, she's got a bunch of puppet constructs, who give the crew a little bit more muscle, as well as Bill Algren and the Kabuki warriors, who are actually really tough. It's a really cool looking crew, and definitely one of the more unique looking ones in the game. And with that, let's go to Doug again to find out a little bit more about how Yuko plays.
So if we look at Yuko, she represents a board state and an area of control master, not dissimilar to what Lynch was doing, but she has the ability basically to create a really nasty bubble that if your opponents decide they want to play a game of Malifaux inside of, it can be really problematic for them. Calm Demeanor is after an enemy within Aura 6 discards a card from its control hand, you get to draw a card. Very powerful. Her defensive tech is Serene Countenance, which is one of the best in the game. Any attack actions that target her automatically suffer a negative to their duel. And now Silent Control says if a model is this crew's leader, after an enemy model within 6 is chosen to activate, it must either discard a card, or this model may choose another enemy model in line of sight that has not activated this turn, and that model must activate instead of the original chosen model. It allows you to have very tight control over what your opponent is actually able to do from an order perspective during a turn. Now, if we look at Yuko 2, it's a bit different. She's a lot more of an independent operator. She has Slippery and Stealth, make her really hard to pin down. She has a strong Stat 7 attack that can punch through armor, and she has one of the best tactical actions in the game in Gather Intel, and that tactical action can produce either an attack, or it can drop a scheme marker in base contact with the target. Both very powerful things. And then Hidden Ledger with the mask trigger can allow you to just remove a non-Joker card from the game. Oftentimes that's either a 12 or a 13 of your opponent's deck that you just rip out of the game. And that's effectively what she's doing.
The Tyrants are ancient entities that have obtained almost godlike powers, and half of one of them lives in Shenlong's head. The Tyrant the Dragon split himself in two in order to escape being captured, and one half of it ended up in Tibet, where it started taking on hosts. It manipulated the Buddhist tradition, and developed a system where 4 temples would train followers to perfect their minds and bodies. This would make them a more suitable host for the dragon, and Shenlong was an exceptional example, and made a great host for the Tyrant. There wasn't much Shenlong could do, except embrace the powers that it gave him, until an incident happened where Shenlong found out the dragon's real purpose. It had tried to fully ascend, sacrificing Shenlong's body in the process, but something went wrong, and it reversed the process and brought Shenlong back from the dead. Since then, Shenlong has been studying to try to figure out how to throw off the tyrant, knowing that it's only using him, and the relationship will ultimately end with his death. So one of the cool things about the Ten Thunders is that they're not just a Japanese faction. They actually pull from cultures all over the East, as well as having a couple of crews of Westerners. But Shenlong and his crew are from Tibet, and most of the models in the crew are different kinds of monks. You have the really offensive monks, the healer monks, the really fast-moving monks, and the drunken fighting monks. They all have a unique playstyle and a unique look to them, and it makes a really cool-looking crew on the table. On top of that, there's a couple of more unusual characters, like the Lotus Eaters, who basically eat an intoxicating plant to get superpowers, and the Charm Warders, who specialize in fighting against demons and summoners. They all work together with different forms of martial arts, and I think it's really cool because monks are not something you always see in wargames. But now let's go back to Doug to find out more about how Shenlong plays.
Shenlong 1 is probably my current favorite master to pilot out of Ten Thunders. He's really strong in that he himself can produce a lot of damage. He can give out a lot of versatile upgrades. Unlike Yalo, where Yalo is like building over the course of the game and becoming individually powerful, Shenlong often gives out these style upgrades and can get benefits from himself and others from them. He is effectively immune to conditions if you want him to be because of Sacred Ink. And then another thing that's just amazing is the chi mechanic that comes along with the monk keyword. So Harness Chi says after this model flips one or more cards as a part of a duel, it can discard a chi token that just sits on him passively, that's what chi does, and gain +2 to its net duel, which means that his stat 6 attack can really be in stat 8 if you want it to be, which is really good. And then the other components there are things like allowing them to take extra concentrate actions and gain chi with those concentrations. Fury of the Dawn is one of the most versatile attack actions in the game. Can do a heck of a lot of stuff. Dragon's Light, which is his other attack, is also very good. And then Spiritual Alignment is also a very solid supporting ability, effectively. So if you're looking at Shenlong 2, Shenlong 2 is a lot more of a support master that can give out different types of style upgrades, support his crew, and support scheming a lot more. He's a lot less of a direct damage piece than Shenlong 1 would be, and instead is going to incentivize you to play a little bit more of a cagey type game plan. Still really fun. It's one of the examples in my mind of two masters styles that are very, very different from one another. So if you're into the monk keyword, you like the aesthetic, I think Shenlong 1 and Shenlong 2 would be pretty cool to check out.
As a child, Lynn Lee developed an obsession with books. With the conditions in Vietnam worsening under the guild's occupation, her family sent her to Malifaux under the care of the Ten Thunders. She was assigned to work in the Library of All Things, a repository of all of the culture and stories of the peoples of Malifaux. She was frequently visited by Misaki, looking for information, and the two developed a friendship. She had a natural connection with the library, and it made her particularly good at finding information whenever she needed it. When Misaki took over the Ten Thunders, she purged all of her father's people, promoting those that were loyal to her, including putting Lynn Lee in charge of the library. She's become an expert on the stories in the library, and is even able to use magic to make the legends temporarily take physical form and do her bidding. Under her leadership, the library has become a much more joyful place, and the Thunders no longer have to fight against it when they're seeking information. Lynn Lee and her crew are one of the coolest looking crews I've ever seen. Half of her crew are normal people who work in the library, keeping track of books and copying texts. But the other half of the crew are the embodiment of different stories, mostly that come from Eastern culture and legends. You've got the story of Raijin, who comes from Shinto mythology, the story of Sun Wukong, which is apparently what like dozens of anime characters are based on, the Jade Rabbit, which is a pretty well-known story, as well as a bunch of other ones. They're all really cool looking models, and they all have this theme of having paper or books around them, because they're literally coming to life off the pages. It's a really amazing looking crew, and I'm really looking forward to getting it all painted up and putting it on the table. And now one more time, let's go to Doug, who's going to tell us a little bit more about how Lynn Lee plays.
So Lynn Lee is a support master. She is very, very good at splitting actions out efficiently with split focus. During the start phase, if this model is the cruise leader, up to 2 other friendly red library models within 8 may gain slow or take a general or attack action. Now, that lets you basically split out AP efficiency. On Lynn Lee 2, or Lynn Lee Storyteller, this is a lot more of a damage-focused variant for her. The premier ability on this card is Creature of Lore, specifically because it has some of the best triggers in the game. And one of the things that Lynn Lee's keyword doesn't do as strongly is produce raw damage. But hiring the storyteller variant allows you to have a pretty good damage producer innately in your master. The other really strong ability to call out here is Confiscated Lore, which is so incredibly strong. I've played with Confiscated Lore a lot on Sonya, and it's been amazing. And I see it just as very strong here as well. She has an ability called Jump Off the Page, which is when this model activates, up to 2 friendly story models within line of sight may push up to 3 ignoring other models. So it's a bit of a reposition that you don't really have to invest in to get value out of. And then other than that, she can gain a lot of life back as long as her friends around her are pinging damage onto things.
So that's it for the 10 Thunders. They were my first faction and they're still one of my favorites. And I think there's a lot more variety there than it might look like at first glance, both in terms of the playstyles as well as the theme and the aesthetics of the crews. Hopefully this video helped you decide which of the masters you like the best, so that you can get in and start playing them. If you haven't seen the other videos I've done in this series, then make sure you check the links in the description, and be sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the ones I put out in the future. Thanks again to Doug from the Danger Planet, as well as Jet from WarLore. Be sure to go check out both of their channels. They both do some great wargaming content, and we should definitely all head over there and give them some support. If you found this video helpful, then there's lots of ways that you can support the channel. Leave a like, consider joining the Patreon, or use the weird affiliate link, or check out the merch store link below. Speaking of folks who support me, huge shout out to the Extremely Cool Kids tier on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels, Dogmatized, and Biclops Gladiator Games. Thanks for watching.